Hey guys, good morning and happy Wednesday. Today we're going to be finding the greatest common factor again, but then we're going to take it one step further. We're going to divide that greatest common factor out of all of my terms. So this is our first venture into factoring together. And let's start with something pretty familiar from yesterday. We're going to factor out our greatest common factor. So the first step, we've got to find that greatest common factor. So what we did yesterday is we said, what are the prime factors of each of these numbers? What can I break these into? Well, 16 I know is 8 and 2. 8 is 4 and 2. 4 is 2 and 2. So I'm saying what numbers multiply together to make 16? That's 8 and 2. And then what numbers multiply together to get 8? 4 and 2 multiply to get 8. And then 2 and 2 multiply to get 4. So what two numbers multiply to get 24? Well, that would be 12 and 2. And what multiplies to get 12? 4 and 3. And then 4 we know is 2 times 2. So we're going to look at these very last numbers in our trees. And we're going to see what do they have in common. Well, they've got a 2, and another 2, and another 2. So what we're going to do is each of these has 3 2's in common. Sorry about that. Each of these has 3 2's in common. So the GCF will multiply all those things they have in common. So they have an 8 in common, and that is our greatest common factor. So we're going to do the numbers first, then we're going to look at our variables. So if I've got p to the third and p to the second, or p cubed and p squared, then how many do they have in common? How many could they match up together? Well, this one has 2, and this one has 2. So they only have 2 that are in common. So the GCF of p to the third and p squared is p squared. A quick way to do this is look at the smaller exponent. That's always going to be your GCF for the variables. So my GCF is 8 p to the second. So GCF is 8p to the second. And what we're going to do is we are going to divide 8p to the second power. We're going to divide that out of both these terms. So we started with 16p cubed plus 24p squared. And what we're going to do is we're going to factor out an 8p to the second. And we're just going to leave that on the outside of some parentheses. So our next step is to divide 8p squared out of both parts. And we're going to put what's left in those parentheses. So 16 divided by 8 is 2. So we're done with that. And what is p to the third divided by p to the second? Well, if I'm dividing 2 powers, then what do I do with these exponents, the 3 and the 2? Well, I would just subtract those because dividing makes numbers smaller, and so does subtraction. So this is 2p to the first, and a positive 24 divided by 8 is a positive 3, and p squared divided by p squared, those cancel. So this is our final answer. Alright, now let's look at numbers 1 through 4. I'm going to do 1 and 2, and I'll leave 3 and 4 for you guys. So number 1, we're going to find the GCF of our coefficients of 9 and of 36. So 9 I've got 3 times 3, and 36 I have 6 times 6, and 6 is 3 times 2, and 3 times 2. And I'm going to see what do they have in common. Well, I've got a pair of 3's here and a pair of 3's here. So my GCF is going to be 3 times 3. I had a pair of 3's. So the GCF is 9. And a quick thing that you should always be checking first is you should always see, does the smaller number go into the bigger number nicely? You know, if I take 36 divided by 9, do I get a nice round number? And I do. So if that happens, then your smaller number here is automatically your GCF. That'll save you a little bit of time. Okay, so my GCF is 9. And now let's look at our variables here. I've got 2 x's here, or x squared. I've only got 1 x over here, so how many x's do they have in common? Well, only one of those do they have in common. So I'm only going to bring 1 x into my GCF. Alright, so now we're going to do some division. So 9x squared plus 36x, we're going to factor out our GCF. So we're going to factor out our 9x. We're going to have some stuff left over in parentheses. Alright, so we divide by our GCF of 9x. And what is 9 divided by 9? Well, that's 1, so we're done there. And x to the second divided by x to the first, we said earlier that we just subtract those exponents. So 2 minus 1 is x to the first. Alright, and we're done with that now, so let's focus on our 36 and our 9x. So 36 divided by 9, positive 36 divided by 9, is a positive 4. And x divided by x, those x's cancel out. So those are gone. And this is my final answer. Alright, let's try number 2. So first thing we should always check, like we saw in this first problem, let's see if we can eliminate some of our work. Does this smaller number go into the bigger number? So can I take 6 divided by 3 and get a nice whole number? And I would. I'd get 2. So what that tells me is 3 is a common factor. So I'm going to have 3 as my greatest common factor. But now let's look at our variables. We've got n to the third and n to the fifth. So how many n's do they have in common? We've got 3 n's in common. So n to the third. And now we're going to divide. So now we've got our original problem, 6n cubed minus 3n to the fifth. And we're going to divide each of these by our greatest common factor of 3n to the third. And don't forget about this negative sign in the middle. So our final answer here, we factored out a 3n to the third, and we're going to figure out what's left. So 6 divided by 3 is 2, so we're done with that. N cubed divided by n cubed. These are going to cancel. Now I've got a negative 3 divided by 3. Well, 3 divided by 3 is 1, and a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So that's a negative 1. Now I've got n to the 5th over n cubed, and we'll just subtract these exponents to get n squared. So that's my final answer. I'm going to have you guys pause the video here in a second, and I'll write out the final answers on the bottom. And then we've got our quizzes assignment for the day. So as always, feel free to email me with any questions you have, and I'll post one more video of somebody else doing greatest common factors, just in case that helps. Sometimes getting a different perspective is nice. So there's the final answer for number 3, and the final answer for number 4 is going to be 7p cubed plus 5. So have a great day, guys, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.